Um, so this is spoken about the scientific process of Krishna consciousness and its gradual development in different stages. And by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which our Srila Prabhupada has given us the summary study of that in the form of a book called The Nectar of Devotion. And also that Nectar of Devotion is also known as the Science of God. So this is also explained, these two verses I'm going to quote. Charitamrita, the of the life and teachings of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared only 500 years ago, or more than that now. I was there in Mayapur for the 500th anniversary. That was like 40 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. And Krishna consciousness is the most fun you can have, by the way. And that you begin to understand as you practice this science and evolve through these stages. So in chapter 23 of the Madhya Lila, that chapter is entitled Life's Ultimate Goal, Love of Godhead. And these last few chapters of the Madhya Lila are very intense chapters filled with Lord Chaitanya's preachings to both Sanatana Goswami and Srila Rupa Goswami. And Krishnadas Kaviraj, the author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, was intimately familiar with the works of the Goswamis, he being a coming just after them, or right at the tail end of their manifest pastimes. He came to Vrindavan, and he himself was a master scholar of both Sanskrit and the science of bhakti. And he had memorized all their books and could quote the verses, which he did here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So these two verses, they go like this in Sanskrit. Adau shraddha tata sadhu sango ta bhajana kriya tato narta nibritti shat tato nishta ruchistata tata shakti tato bhavas tata prema bhudanchati sadhakana mayam premna radhur bhave bhavet pramaha. And Srila Prabhupada gives this wonderful translation. In the beginning, there must be faith. Then one becomes interested in associating with pure devotees. Thereafter, one is initiated by the spiritual master and executes the regulative principles under his order. Thus, one is freed from all unwanted habits and becomes firmly fixed in devotional service. Thereafter, one develops taste and attachment. This is the way of sadhana bhakti, the execution of devotional service according to the regulative principles. Gradually, emotions intensify, and finally, there is an awakening. This is the gradual development of love of Godhead for the devotee interested in Krishna consciousness. So he has described these stages in a nutshell, and we're going to elaborate on a few of them. So he says, Adau Shraddha. Adau, the word Adi in Sanskrit means first. Prabhupada renders this as Adau Shraddha. In the beginning, there must be Shraddha, faith. Or as he, in the word for word, which most people understand Shraddha to mean, he says, first there must be, or disinterest in material affairs. Who's on the roof? They should not be there. It's probably kids. Firm faith or disinterest in material affairs and interest in spiritual advancement. Now, for those of us coming from the Western culture, we may have some experience of this. Those who have become devotees, of course, do. And those who have not yet become devotees, they may also have this experience of disinterest in material affairs and interest in spiritual advancement. Because by its very nature, material life is very frustrating. Like Hendricks said, it's a frustrating mess. He died quite young. He was at the right age to be interested in Krishna consciousness, but he was very absorbed in material affairs, but he was also experiencing that frustrating, and especially because he was so heavily involved in sinful activity like intoxication and illicit sex and meat eating. Those sinful activities, they cloud the consciousness of the living entity. The pure consciousness of the soul becomes covered over by indulging in especially these four things: meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. I lived for many years in our temple in Philadelphia, and we would do our Ratha Yatra on the boardwalk at Atlantic City, New Jersey, which was a 1-hour drive from Philly. And so the devotees used to joke that, what do people do when they go to Atlantic City? They go to the boardwalk. Within 5 minutes, they've broken all four regular principles. Because what are the primary attractions there? Meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. Yes. Oh, it didn't take 5 minutes and you're finished. You're spiritually doomed. So this is part of the science of bhakti. In order to awaken and advance spiritually, one needs to become purified or free from these base indulgences. I remember when I was a kid, I saw this movie. I don't remember what the movie was, but it was like these British lords and ladies. And the British lords, they all sat in their gentlemen's clubs with their big overstuffed leather chairs, and they smoked their cigars and they drank. And then one of the women noted that the men were of such a bestial character because the women didn't do those things. In those days, the women hardly even would smoke, which later became not the case. So these civilized society ladies, they consider these pleasures of the flesh that their lordly rich husbands would engage in to be bestial, animal-like activities, unfitting for a civilized human being. So in the old world, that culture was there, especially if people in different spiritual traditions, they knew through the teachings of the church and etc. that one should not engage in sinful activities, but should carefully protect oneself from that bad association. So this adau shraddha, this awakening of faith, it happens, especially happens to young people. They're like young, and in my generation, it was a lot of young people. It was an overwhelming movement within the society that there's got to be something better than this. The standard of material enjoyment that our parents have given us, it's very high, but there's an emptiness. There's a lack of fulfillment of the self. And because the self is spiritual by nature, the self wants to become fulfilled on the spiritual platform. And just indulging in the pleasures of the senses, it just doesn't cut it for the soul. But generally speaking, in this world, the souls, please come in and find a place to sit. We have some cushions. There's maybe a chair or two. So, yeah, you can sit on the couch with Ganga. That's Sadhu Sangha. We're coming to that. That's the second stage. So, like Mick Jagger sang in the 1960s, when I was still in elementary school, I can get no satisfaction, but I try and I try. And he goes on to talk about how society is trying to push these enjoyments and concepts of a material life, foist those upon one, but it doesn't satisfy the self. And he says, but you might find it, you just might try. And that is an awakening of Krishna consciousness. As Shama Sundar was carving Radha Krishna in the basement of, what's that studio? The Beatles studio? Abbey Road. And the Rolling Stones were practicing there every day. And he was carving Radha Krishna into the frame of John Lennon's piano. Because Shama Sundar became friends with the Beatles, especially George, who took to Krishna consciousness and became a very important force of his life. And George was very dear to Srila Prabhupada, and he rendered a lot of service to our movement, especially there in England. And when Srila Prabhupada was leaving this world in 1977, he took a ring off his finger and he turned to his servants and said, "Give this to George." One of the last things he did to make sure to remember George. And of course, George was very moved by that. So that's Adau Shraddha. Now, somebody may make an argument that, well, Shraddha, faith, what is this faith? I mean, faith is just blind. Like there was a really good group called Blind Faith, right? Eric Clapton and Stevie Winwood. But faith is actually something much deeper and more sublime than how we define faith in the English language. This Shraddha is so profound and so deep, it is actually the symptom of an elevated devotee. So it's not like, okay, in the beginning I have faith, but then I really, make a little advancement and I don't need this faith anymore. I have realization. I don't need this faith. In the 6th chapter, he says, Yogi apasarvesham madgatanat maratmana shadavan bhajate jo mam sameyukta tamo mataha. So the highest yogi, amongst all yogis, yoginam apasarvesham, amongst all the different types of yogis, and there are many types of yogis, the one that Krishna, who is the goal of yoga, considers to be the highest is what? Shraddhavan bhajate jo mam same yukta tamo taha. I consider that yogi to be the highest, who is fully developed and endowed with this great faith and worships me. Shraddhavan. Van means to possess. So Shraddhavan, one who has faith, one who has great faith. So as one progresses in this path of bhakti yoga, or this science of Krishna consciousness, one's faith begins to expand and grow in these amazing ways, both horizontally and vertically, and in every direction. This faith begins to expand, and then one has increasing realization of one's identity as a pure spirit soul or a servant of Krishna. Shraddhavan bhajate yo mam. So one who worships Krishna in great faith, he is the highest yogi of all the different types of yogis. It's a very conclusive statement coming at the end of the 6th chapter, which is all about the yoga system. And there are also non-devotional yogis who don't love Krishna, so who just do some poses and different postures and things, and even develop mystic powers, but without developing love of God. So there are different types of yoga and different developments of yoga, but the best is the Shraddhavan. So Adau Shraddha, and next Tat Sadhu Sangha. One begins, Prabhupada translates that in the word for word of this verse, one begins to associate with pure devotees. What is a pure devotee? A pure devotee is one who is 100% engaged in serving and developing love for Krishna without any desire, activities, material gain, philosophical speculation, acquisition of mystic powers, which yogis can get. They can do some far out stuff. There are 8 perfections in mystic yoga. Ashtasiddhi, the 8 perfections. One can become smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest, lighter than the lightest, heavier than the heaviest. One can create planets in outer space. One can go anywhere he wishes. Like these yogis can go down in one river in India and they come up at the Kumbh Mela, which is just going on right now. And some of these yogis are hundreds of years old. Their bodies don't deteriorate. They hardly eat anything. And they spend their time all in meditation, fasting, austerity, performing their yogic practice and developing their cities. But they all like to come together at Kumbh Mela, which is just now winding up, I believe. And this year was the Mahakumbh. It's a special Kumbh Mela. Kumbh Mela is once every 12 years. And then in between that, every 6 years, there's the Ardha Kumbh Mela. Ardha means half. And then there's the Mahakumbh once every 144 years. So many people will not see it in their lifetime unless they live to be 144 years old, which these yogis are. Some of these yogis, they come every Mahakumbh. And they're hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old. And they look just like young fellows, but they are not. So anyway, Sadhu Sangha, association with pure devotees, those who are interested in serving and loving Krishna as their goal of life. And the pure devotee is someone who leaves aside all material considerations in order to practice this science of loving Krishna. So I had a couple notes here. I'm going to look at that. In terms of this word adi, it occurs in many different places in the scripture. Every day here in the morning after our Mongol Artik, we chant together both the Sanskrit and the translations of the Bhagavad Gita. And this past week, we've been in the 10th chapter. In the second verse of the 10th chapter, Krishna says, Aham adir hi devanam. Maharshinam chasarvashaha. He said, know that in all respects, I am the source of the demigods, who are very important personalities in the universe, directors of the cosmic affairs, as it were, and the Maharshis, the Maharishis, the great sages who live on very rarefied and planets that are very difficult to achieve those planets. So, Aham Hadir Hidevanam. Adi, I am the source of those. And in Brahma Samhita, which is a very, very old Shastra, at the beginning of the creation of the universe, after his realization and enlightenment by Krishna, the first verse of the Brahma Samhita, he says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachit Ananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. So Ishvara Parama Krishna, Lord, the supreme Ishvara. Ishvara means controller. Parama, the supreme controller of everything. Ishvara Parama Krishna. So he is the most learned person in the universe. He's personally enlightened by Krishna himself at the beginning of the creation. And that is his statement. So we follow such statements from such personalities. Lord Brahma is the head of our sampradaya, or our disciplic line. And he has most emphatically stated right off the bat that Krishna is God. Okay. So you don't have to understand it, but you can take it on the authority of Lord Brahma, who is the most authoritative, self-realized soul in the entire universe, in the whole material world. And he says, Ishvara Parama Krishna. First of all, that Krishna is God. That's not a very difficult concept. Ishvara Parama Krishna. Oh, it's Krishna. And what is he like? Sachit Ananda Vigraha. He has a Vigraha, a form that's composed of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means eternity. No temporality, no birth and death. No, Sat, Chit. Chit means consciousness and knowledge, full consciousness and knowledge of everything. That is another of his characteristics. And not only Sat Chit, but Ananda. He is composed of bliss. He is the supreme blissed out personality in existence. And those are his characteristics. Anadir Adir Govinda. He is the origin of everything. Therefore, he is called Adi Govinda. And then Sarva Karanam. This is a very interesting concept. Sarva Karana means he is the cause of all causes. So everything we see has some cause. Just like I've taken birth in this body, well, that was caused by my parents. And then someone has caused them, their parents, the grandparents, the great-grandparents. So every phenomenon or everything you try to trace out in existence has a cause. But then when you come to Krishna, he has no cause. He causes everything else. He's the cause of all causes. This is a very wonderful Vedic concept. And those of us who have grown up in the Judeo-Christian concepts of life, hang on to the seat of your pants. Because here you go. This is a description of God. He's eternal. He knows everything. He's full of bliss. He causes everything. He's the supreme. This is so definitive and so scientific and such an understanding that is really unprecedented in our experience in the Western world. Now, those of you who are from India or of Indian origin, that is different. You already know this. You have been trained in this Vedic understanding for thousands and millions of generations. So it is your birthright. And Srila Prabhupada said that Indian people, they are already Krishna conscious. It's just perhaps maybe a little covering needs to be removed, and then it comes out, bam, full force. So therefore you find in our Hare Krishna temples all over the world, a lot of Indian people. Because they are what? They are Krishna conscious. Why? Because they have been trained to understand that they're not this body, they're the soul. And that there's action and reaction, there's good karma and bad karma. And what you do with yourself and your time and your life, it's really important, and you should not violate the injunctions of the Shastras. And they have this faith. They're very fortunate for Indian people. It is a very pious birth because India is the Dharma Bhumi. It is the land of religion. Therefore, Kumbh Mela. How many people are attending Mahakumbh this year? 400 something million? 400 and something million? That's more than the population of the good old US of A. Those people turn up for a religious festival. They're not playing around. Our ISKCON camp there has an tent with these 3D diagram presentations and moving robotic exhibitions that depict the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And they're feeding hundreds and thousands of people every day out of our big ISKCON kitchen, headed by one of our great saintly devotees, Gauranga Prabhu, who is not only an engineer and a great self-realized devotee and a brilliant speaker on the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, but a man who knows how to get things done. And he can feed hundreds and thousands of people every day. He's very expert. So, now Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, will reciprocate with you or anyone who becomes interested in this science of Krishna, Adau Shraddha, and they begin to associate with pure devotees. What? Hearing about Krishna. Here in this, we're having our class every morning and our little lecture here. And then we chant the holy names congregationally in Sankirtan, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, with the mridanga and the kartals and the harmonium very melodiously and beautifully, and with great affection and devotion and surrender, which Krishna ultimately in Bhagavad Gita says that is the ultimate religion, is to give up any other kind of religion and surrender unto him. So what happens when we surrender to Krishna? Well, Krishna explains this in the Gita. Yayatamam prapadyante tam tadaiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanavartante manusha partha sarvashaha. That everyone, as they surrender to me, Krishna says, I reward them accordingly. This is a reciprocation. And God has this amazing ability to reciprocate, not with just a few people or the ones like his intimate little circle or whatever. He reciprocates with manusha partha sarvashaha, with everybody. Everybody. And so as we develop our Krishna consciousness and try to surrender to Krishna, giving up the sinful activities and trying to adopt this Krishna consciousness, this bhakti yoga of devotional service to Krishna, then he reciprocates with us. So what is the result of Krishna consciousness, you may ask? The result of Krishna consciousness is more Krishna consciousness. This is the wonderful nature of spiritual realization. The more we endeavor and the more steps we take on a personal level, because it's up to you, it's up to the individual. You know, they say you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. It's also true of the soul. You can bring him to Krishna consciousness, but you can't make him chant the holy name. Prabhupada would humorously talk about this, where a man telling someone, chant, chant, chant. And the reply is, can't. So it is based on the individual desire. Our whole advancement in Krishna consciousness is based on our desire. If we desire to serve Krishna, then as we surrender and endeavor, it's not like a free ride, you got to work for it too. Nothing good is obtained without some struggle. And then there's a saying that there's no meaning of a glorious victory without a hard struggle. Then it becomes more glorious, that victory. So the victory of the soul to leave this material world is a great victory, but it's not a walk in the, as the old, I think it was Charlie Pride country and western song, I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden. The more we surrender to Krishna, the more Krishna reciprocates to us. This he also explains in the 10th chapter. That my devotees, they enlighten one another, they talk about me, they sincerely dedicate their lives to me, and I, with the shining lamp of knowledge, destroy the darkness of ignorance that's within the heart. And this darkness of ignorance is what covers us and separates us from our natural state of Krishna consciousness. It's just like water. Water in its natural state, pure, clean, very desirable. But you may have a water in an unclean state. What do you have to do? You have to filter out the impurities. You get rid of the unwanted things, which is another stage further on called anartha nivritti shat. Prabhupada says giving up unwanted habits. It means giving up the unwanted things in the heart that plague us and cause us misery, like lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, and illusion. Those are our enemies in this world. But the pure soul is not encumbered by these lower enemies. So the more we advance in Krishna consciousness, the more anartha nivritti shat, the more we give up these unwanted things. They fall to the wayside. And then our path back home, back to Godhead becomes and clearer and better and better. And the more we engage this way, the more Krishna gives us enlightenment within the heart God is in the heart. He's like Santa Claus. He knows what you are thinking. What's there say? He knows when you've been good or bad. So be good for goodness sake. He knows your every thought, your every evil desire, your desire to exploit others, your cheating, your lying. What was that song by Led Zeppelin? It goes, lying, cheating, hurting, that's all you seem to do. So that describes the conditioned soul. Manipulating, cajoling, trying to get over on everyone else for their own sense gratification. The Krishna consciousness means to become gradually free from these unwanted things. And then our love for Krishna and our true spiritual self naturally becomes manifest. And all the good qualities of the demigods, which include knowledge and religion and other wonderful qualities, they become manifest automatically in the person of a devotee. So we'll stop here. Thank you very much. Our time is up. Any briefly questions, comments, realizations, refutations? All right, they say that silence means agreement. Who are we to argue with this philosophy that Srila Prabhupada has given us from the Vedas? It is the real truth and the path of freedom for the living entity. And so now we will further our enlightenment in this path by having a nice raucous kirtan for the pleasure of the Lord. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.